Have you ever really stopped to think about what separates a casual side hustle from a full-blown business? Or, a hobby from a real enterprise? Well, today we're going to cut through all the noise and get right down to the core of what a business actually is. We're going to break it down with a super simple 7-point framework. So, here's the game plan. We're going to start by just looking at the world around us. Then we'll lock in a really clear definition of what a business is. After that, we'll dive into its core engine, its ultimate goals, and the risks that just come with the territory. And then at the end, we'll tie it all together so you can see why this framework is so important.
All right, let's kick things off. To really understand what a business is, we need to start with a really simple observation about the world we all live in.
No, seriously, just take a second. Look at the device you're watching this on, the coffee mug on your desk, the chair you're sitting in. None of it just magically appeared out of thin air, right? It was all made, shipped, and sold by someone somewhere. That whole process, that's the absolute foundation of business, and that's where our story starts.
Okay, so all that making and selling brings us to the big question. Where's the dividing line? When does some activity cross over and become a true business? Let's nail down a clear definition.
The very first big distinction boils down to intent. Is an activity economic or non-economic? If you're doing something to earn a living, like a doctor seeing a patient, that's an economic activity. But if you're doing something out of love or sympathy, say cooking dinner for your family, that's non-economic. A business, by definition, has to fall into that first category.
And here it is, our official definition. A business is an economic activity. Check. That involves making and selling stuff, either goods or services. And what's the goal? To earn a profit. How does it do that? By satisfying a human need. Every single piece of that definition is absolutely crucial, as we're about to find out.
So, now we know a business is an economic activity. Let's look at what actually gets it moving. I like to think of it as a two-stroke engine that powers every single business out there.
First up, a business needs something to offer. It either produces goods itself, think of a car factory, or it procures them. It gets them from a supplier, like a grocery store buying produce from local farms. But that's only the first stroke of the engine. The second, essential step is the sale or exchange. Those goods or services have to be handed over to a buyer for some kind of value. And that right there is exactly why cooking for your family isn't a business, but opening a restaurant is.
Okay, so the engine is running. We're making and selling things. But what defines the rhythm of that engine? And what's the ultimate reward for doing it? Well, that brings us to our next two characteristics.
A business isn't just a one-off event. Let's say you sell your old phone online, and you even make a profit. That's just a single transaction. But if you open a store and you sell phones every single day, now you've got a business. The key difference here is regularity. A business has to operate on a consistent, recurring basis.
So what's the big reward for all this regular activity? It's profit. And as this quote says, profit isn't just a nice-to-have goal. It's the fuel. It's the income that lets a business survive and grow and keep serving its customers. Without it, that engine we talked about, it just stalls out.
Now, if it were as simple as just making things and selling them regularly for a profit, well, everyone would be doing it. This brings us to the final and maybe the most challenging characteristics of business, the inherent gamble of it all.
Because, as anyone who's ever tried to start something can tell you, that path to profit is, well, it's never a straight line. There are all these forces at play that are often completely out of your control.
And this introduces the idea of uncertainty of return. It's basically a fancy way of saying that no matter how good your plan is, you can never know for sure how much money you're going to make. You invest your time, you invest your money, hoping for a profit, but a loss is always a real possibility. Nothing is ever guaranteed.
This uncertainty is what creates risk. The chance that something unfavorable happens and causes a loss. And these threats can pop up from anywhere. A competitor could open up shop right across the street. People's tastes could change and suddenly your product isn't cool anymore. Or something totally unpredictable, like a fire or a natural disaster, could happen. Risk is an essential, unavoidable part of playing the game.
So, we've broken down all 7 of these characteristics. But why is it so important to have this checklist in your head? Let's pull it all together.
And here they are, all in one spot. A business is an economic activity that produces or finds goods to sell on a regular basis, and it's driven by the need to make a profit.
But it has to operate in a world full of uncertainty, and it has to constantly deal with risk. If you take away even one of these elements, what you have might be a hobby, or a one-time sale, or a charity, but it's not a business.
Understanding these rules isn't just some boring academic exercise. This is the fundamental playbook for creation and innovation. So I'll leave you with this question. Now that you actually know the rules of the game, what problems do you see out there in the world that could be solved by applying this very framework?